Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to sort of create a little game here in Matlab. And what the game's going to do is it's going to sort of pick a random number and then ask the user to guess what that number is. And it'll tell the user if you were too high or too low, and you sort of have to zero in on the guess. Okay. We'll go through this sort of quickly. So if you haven't watched the previous videos on loops and if statements, watch those, and then come back to this one. All right, so first things first, we're going to be using the input function in this demo. So to get a sense of what that is, I'm just going to run help input here. And so you can see the input function prompts for user input. So it just displays some sort of prompt, and then it can store the response from the user. It's best to just see this in action. So I'm going to say x equals input, enter a number, like that. So you just put some string. And you can see here it prints out the string I put in, enter a number. And if I enter in some number like 23, that value is getting stored here in X. So it sort of can take information from the user and store it in your workspace. Okay. So what we're going to do here in our script is, so we're going to sort of lay out what the script is going to do with comments first, and then we'll sort of fill in what we want those sections to do with code. So first we're going to say pick a random number for the user to guess. So this is going to sort of be some number within some range that the user has to guess the value of, right? Then once we have a value, we're going to say ask the user to make a first guess, right? So the user is going to sort of take a stab at what they think the number is. And then we're going to say, tell the user if they were too high or too low. If their guess was too high or too low, right? And then we sort of want to repeat these two sections, making a guess and telling the user if it was too high or too low over and over again until the user gets the right value. Okay, so let's pick a random number for the user to guess. So we'll store this in a variable called let's just call it answer for the right answer, and we're just going to make this a random number from 1 to 100. So if you haven't seen the rand_i function yet, it just lets you choose a random integer. So rand_i of like 5 will pick a random integer between 1 and 5. You can see all of these are between 1 and 5. So 100 will just pick a random integer between 1 and 100. Okay, so now we're going to ask the user to make a guess. So we're going to store that in a variable called guess. So we're going to say guess equals input guess a number between 1 and 100, like this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say now we have the user's guess stored in guess, and now we have to respond if that guess was too high or too low. So we're going to say if we're going to use an if statement here to check this, right? If guess is less than answer, right? We're going to respond to that the value is too high. So we're going to say fprintf your guess was too high, or sorry, too low. If guess is less, it's too low. And then we'll give them repeat what their guess was. Else, your guess was too high. Right? Okay, so we can run this just to get a sense of what it is. So we have no idea what the number is. We can say, let's say we guess the number of, I don't know, 50, right? Your guess 50 was too low. Turns out the actual answer was 96. We sort of get to cheat and see it here. But the guess was too low, right? So that seems to work right. I'm going to add new line characters here too. Okay. Now, so one thing you might have noticed is this alpha. So this if only checks if guess is less than answer. So this else captures or catches all other conditions, which can be either guess is bigger than answer or guess could be equal to answer. It'll still fall to this block, right? So we don't want that to happen. So what we can do is we can say we're going to use what's called an if else if block. So else if lets us check for another sort of logical condition. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if guess is less than answer, print out that it's too low. Else if guess is bigger than answer. So this lets us check for one condition. If that's not true, it lets us check for a second condition and print out something depending on if that second condition is true. Right? Now we're going to have this else to catch all other conditions. But really the only thing left that's possible, so either if guess is not less than answer, it goes to the next one. If guess is not bigger than answer, it'll go here. And so the only thing possible left is that guess is equal to the answer. And so now we can print out congratulations, you guessed the number. And I'll print it out in parentheses. And so now we can actually just tell them we're going to print out what the answer was here. Okay. Just to get a sense of what this is doing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out this answer variable, and I'm just going to force it to be, let's say, 14 here. Okay. So I'm just going to run this to get a sense of what's going on. Okay, so let's say I guess a number lower than 14, right? Your guess 10 was too low. Great. Let's say I guess something higher than 14, like 68. Your guess 68 was too high. Perfect. And finally, if I guess the right number, 14, it's going to say congratulations, you guessed the number in 14. Okay, so it looks like our script's working well, but the problem is right now the user only gets one shot at it, right? They only get one guess. Here, we'll leave it at 14 for now. So they only get one guess, right? And so what we'd rather have is we'd rather have the user keep guessing until they get the right answer, right? And so we're going to do that with a loop. Okay, so what we're going to do is we want this entire block of code to get repeatedly run, right? We want the user to keep making guesses, and we want to keep telling them how they did while they still haven't gotten the right answer. Okay, so so let's say we're going to have a loop here that lets the user repeatedly make guesses. So one thing that we can do is we can use a for loop, right? So we can say like for index equals 1 to 5. I'm just going to indent everything because it's sort of good practice. Run this code. Okay, so let's sort of get a sense of what's going on here, right? So this is saying for index equals 1 to 5. So it's going to let index increment from 1 to 5. It's going to sort of run, and then it's going to run these lines of code over and over again, right? So let's just do that. So guess a number between 1 and 10. Let's say I guess 50 first. Oh, your guess 50 was too high. Let's say I run 25. Oh, 25 was too high. Let's say I run 13. Oh, 13 was too low. I don't know, 20 was too high. 15 was too high, right? So you can see here, it's letting me do this guess 5 times, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And I didn't happen to get it in 5 tries. I didn't get to 14. But because this index only runs from 1 to 5, this loop only repeats 5 times, so we only get 5 guesses, right? So that's kind of unfortunate. What we'd rather do is, so on the other hand, another problem with using a for loop in this case is if I hit run here, let's say I get it on the first run, right? If I just happen to guess 14, then it's still going to ask me again. It doesn't recognize that I got the right answer, and it's going to ask me again, and I have to keep sort of putting in answers until it runs 5 times, right? So we have no idea how many times the user is going to want to make guesses. So in that case, a for loop's not the best loop because we don't know how many times we want to run this loop, right? Instead, a better loop is what's called a while loop. So while loops are very similar to for loops in that they use the while key, or sorry, they use the same sort of syntax. They have a special keyword followed by an end statement. But instead of assigning a variable to some array here, we're going to sort of check for some logical condition to be true. So one example, so one thing we can check for is we can say while guess is not equal to answer. right? And so this is going to say while the guess is wrong, right? Then what we're going to do is we're going to sort of repeatedly do this thing over and over again, right? And so this will keep asking the user to keep making guesses until they get to the right answer. Okay, so let's try this. So so you notice I ran it, and it didn't actually run. That's because guess from the last time I ran it is actually still equal to 14, right? And so that's why it never actually entered this while loop, because guess is equal to 14. So let's clear. Okay, so you'll notice we have this error, right? And so the error says undefined function of variable guess. It says guess my number, which is my script name, at line 11. So it tells me exactly which line my error is on, right? And what this is saying is it doesn't know what this variable guess is, right? And you can imagine, because I haven't actually said what guess is anywhere above here, right? Then it doesn't know what the value is, so it can't compare it to answer. The first time we define what guess is actually over here, after we've entered the while loop, right? So one way around this is you can just initialize guess to something that you know won't actually be the right answer. So here I'm just initializing guess to -1. And so it's going to say, well, -1 is not equal to answer, which is definitely going to be true because answer is going to be a number between 1 and 100. So then that way we can sort of break into the loop and get our first guess, right? So this is just sort of a trick to get around the fact that we haven't defined guess yet. Okay, so I'm going to clear, and I'm going to run this again. All right, great. Guess a number between 1 and 100, right? And so let's say I make a guess, 50. 50 was too high, 25 was too high, 13 was too low, 18, 15, 14, something like this, right? And so as soon as we get to 14, you can see it says, congratulations, you guessed the number 14, and then it exits, right? Because now guess is equal to the right answer, and so we can exit. So that's great. So that's when we knew the actual answer. So I can get rid of this and now have it pick a random number. And so actually let's add the CLC line here so that it clears the screen. Okay, guess a number between 1 and 100. So now I have no idea what the actual answer is. So we're actually playing. 50 was too low this time. 75 was too high. 60 was too low. 65, 68. 66. All right, so this time the number happened to be 66, and we sort of slowly got there, right? So that's sort of a fun way to use use while loops and if statements to play this sort of guessing game. Okay, just to sort of make this more fun, we can also do things like store the number of guesses made. So I'll say num guesses equals 0, for example, right? And so now every time they make a guess, what I'm going to do is I'm going to increment this value here. So I'm going to say, let's add a comment. Increment the number of guesses. Guesses equals num guesses. Oops. Plus 1. So what this is going to do is every time they make a guess, it's going to add 1 to this variable here. So if they make 5 guesses, this will be 5. If they make 10, it'll be 10, so on and so forth, right? Maybe I should do that. I'm just going to do that before. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm also going to say, when I print out congratulations over here, I'm going to also say, let's print out it took you guesses to get it right. So I'm just going to say print out how many guesses it took them to get the right answer, and so that's going to be stored in this num guesses variable. Okay, so I saved that. Now let's run it. Guess a number between 1 and 100. Again, I have no idea what the answer is. 50 was too high. 25 is too high. 12 was, wow, it's a low number. 5 is too high. 2 is too low. All right, 4, right? You guessed the right number, 4. It took you 7 guesses to get it right. All right.